Well, I'm Leo, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Leo.
You know, this is none of my doing. It's through the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm able to stand up here tonight with the greatest gift of all, you know, the gift of sobriety. I came in here not knowing what to expect, and very sick, spiritually bankrupt, physically and mentally sick. Didn't know what emotions were. I'd stuffed them all my life. All I knew was how to drink and run from life. And through you people, I've been instilled a new way of life and able to deal with life on life's terms. And right now I feel like crying. I'm so, I can't really describe it, but it's something that money can't buy. And I feel super. My little sister's even here tonight. And these cakes mean so much to me because last year I had my mom and dad giving me my cake, and my dad died this last year. But one of the greatest things that he was able to see me sober for a year. And I know that he's with me now. And any newcomer that's here tonight, this program does work. I've had to do a little bit of the footwork and follow direction, which sometimes I really didn't want to do. But I've had a good sponsor who I've learned to love dearly. Through you people, I've learned to love and to be loved. And I'm happy to be here and looking forward to hearing Bill speak. Thank you.
Just before we get to Bill, there's some other people around here that are a little bit more important. And that's the new people that are here. Do we have any visitors here? Do we have anybody out there within their first 30 days of sobriety?
I'm John. I'm alcoholic.
Hi, John. Let's give them a hand. Are there any visitors? Any out of the district or out of town visitors? Jeez, Bill, I stole long enough. What do I got down here?
I'm Cliff Alcoholic from Passcode.
Hi,
No, I'm still.
I'm Mark. That's Daryl, alcoholic.
Hi.
I'm Boots, I'm a Passcode, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Bruce.
Any others? Okay, and now our speaker, Bill.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Bill Evans, an alcoholic.
Hi, Bill.
He didn't kill too much time. There's 3 or 4 people here tonight that I told that I was going to tell that story. But after second thought, I decided if I went into details about him, it would take too long. We'd have to be here till about 9 o'clock. So I'll go into mine a little bit and try to relate to you why that I'm here as a part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not going into details about my drinking, just give you a little experience. The things that I had in relation to being an alcoholic, which I didn't know before I come to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew that I had a drinking problem, but I didn't know anything at all what to do about it until I got here. Like so many people that started out early in life drinking, I think I must have been around 21 or 22 before I started drinking to any extent. Why, probably during my school years that I probably had a drink or two, but nothing to cause any trouble whatsoever. even though in college I had access to all the grain alcohol that I would have wanted if I didn't like some of the kids that were there that broke into the labs and would steal the grain alcohol. But after getting out of school, as a young man, I went into a community in the mountains of North Georgia as principal of a school. The man that was before me at that particular time had been run off by the kids there. And a good friend of mine that was in school with me had come from that particular community, and he kind of informed me how to get along with those people up there before getting there. And I took his advice and tried to be just exactly like he set out, that I'd be very friendly, not too pushy in a way whatsoever. But the thing that was so amusing about this, that the first day that I was in school, I had a couple of kids in there. Well, I wouldn't call them kids, but they were older than I was at that particular time, and they give you a trying out. Rather than getting upset and getting mad with them, I just asked them to stay after school and we'd have a talk, in which we did. And for some reason or other, they become very good friends of mine. And I was very successful in the first years that I was in this community, and I think which was one of the downfalls of my drinking was the fact that I had so many pats on the back that I began to feel very important. And being an alcoholic that I know now, it doesn't pay for an alcoholic to feel that he's very important in the community, particularly one that he's very new in. So this went on for about 4 years. And I've become acquainted with some of the people in the community that were supposed to be pillars of the post or pillars of the community, and I began to have a few drinks. And I got a few drinks and I began to express myself in a way that I felt that things should be operated in that community, and consequently they didn't take too well with these people. So it wasn't too long before they asked me if I would please resign. In other words, they fired me. So I went into another community in the same respect, and it started out very good in that community. And we went along for about 5 years in this particular community, and the drinking had gotten a little bit worse, and they also asked me to resign. And again, I was fired. The next one, I lasted a year, not realizing just exactly what was happening in my life. But to farther along, the things that was happening to me at that particular time were growing closer and closer together, as far as holding jobs were concerned. And as things went along in life, I began to move from one place to another. And this oldest son of mine at one time told his mother that Dad ought to run for governor of the state of Georgia. And she asked him why, and he said, well, he's already canvassed the state. But anyway, we could kind of continue to drink and finally got out of the school teaching business and into industry. And as most alcoholics, as they began to drink more and more, they can become most anything that they would like to be. So I consequently wound up as an industrial engineer during the war for Bell Aircraft Company, which was in Marietta, Georgia at that particular time. and had a lot of fun drinking at that particular time, and along come the opportunity to come west. I come in one afternoon and told Margaret that we were going to Washington. And she was very disappointed with the fact that she was going to have to leave her family and come west. So we come out west. This was during the war. We'd gone to DuPont recruiters and gotten enough gasoline stamps to come to Washington. And we were out at Hanford, Washington at this particular time. And we stayed around there until the creditors began to catch up with us and we had to move on. So we moved to Seattle. And I went to work there for Boeing Aircraft Company. It's pretty hard to recollect all of the things that you encountered along the line. So we hung around there for a while, and again the creditors began to catch up with us, and so we went to the board and told them we wanted to go back to Georgia, so they gave us enough gasoline stamps to go back to Georgia. Instead of going to Georgia, we come to California. Wound up in Oakland. During the war, we had all of our stuff shipped from Seattle down to Oakland. We got in there about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you get a country boy that comes into a city like that during the war when the shipyards are letting out, and you get pretty frightened. So we immediately decided that we didn't want to stay in Oakland, so we went to the express company and told them to ship our stuff on down south. And we headed out for Los Angeles. And as we come down Highway 1, we wound up in Santa Maria and spent the night. And we run into some people that happened to have lived in the mountains of North Georgia, was operating a hotel up on North Broadway. And the next morning, as we started out, Margaret just made the remarks that she would surely like to live in this little community. But we continued on down to Los Angeles, and I went to work for Standard Oil Company and worked there for a short period of time, and they didn't appreciate my ability, so I knocked off there and went to work for Southern California Gas Company. And we lived around Los Angeles for a short period of time, and then they transferred me to Bakersfield. And this is where the drinking really began to show up real good. So after living around there for a short period of time and getting settled, I run up and down the state. In the summertime, I would go north, and in the wintertime, I'd go south. And come back broke, sick, sad, and sorry. And I tried to get Margaret at one time to go back east. And she said, "No, sir, we are not going to set foot out of this place." So I went to work for Richfield out of Cuyama, just after they had discovered the oil fields out there. And this is how I become acquainted with Richfield, and not until later on, after I got sober, did I get acquainted with Jimmy Klein's father, Jimmy Klein. That'll come in a little bit later. But anyway, we had gotten a home out there and moved Margaret out there from Bakersfield, and we settled down and we're going to make our fortune, become a real good citizen of the community. And for some reason or other, she said the wrong thing one night. And I got in the old jalopy that we had at that particular time and headed east. She wouldn't go with me, so I went alone. Now, on this drunk, I made 2 trips across the continental United States and back. And on the last trip, I was looking for a kid that I used to have as a basketball player in one of the communities that I worked in back there. He was a real good basketball player, and I'd have to kick him off the team about 3 or 4 times a year for drinking. So I was going to find him. I knew that if I got with him, then we'd have some free booze. But to my disappointment, I found him and went down to his place of business. And he invited me in and began to tell me his story. And we sat there and talked for about 30 minutes. And at that particular time, he had been on the program of Alcoholics Anonymous for 4 years. And I wanted no part of him. I got out and started looking for greener pastures. And on this drunk, I got 3 jobs, teaching school at 3 different places. And the last place that I was in, the fellow that was superintendent of schools come to me on Monday morning after I'd been there for a week. He says, you better be careful with your drinking, that these people are going to do something about it if you're not. So I immediately, after he'd left, I had a couple of half a pints of booze in my desk. And after he left, I got the booze, locked the door of the school building, put the keys on the desk and walked out. Went to my car and went to the place where I was boarding and got my clothes, what few that I had at that particular time, and headed west, coming back to California. And this is a miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous that I like to talk about for a short period of time. And I come on back to California and coming across the desert out there, very happy in the respect that I was half drunk at that particular time, singing a song, Your Baby's Coming Home. Never no more to roam. So I come on in, and come out to Cuyama. This was in February. Weather was very cold out there. Knocked on the door sometime in the early morning, and Margaret come to the door and flipped on the light and opened the door. And she said, oh, it's you. You can't come in. I said, oh, yes, I can. This is just as much of my place as it is yours. And she says, I got news for you. There's been some changes made. What had happened while I'd been gone, she had had the place put in her name entirely. They took my name off of the place, but rather than cause a scene, she said, you can go in the back room and go to bed. And I did. And stayed around for a day, and on Monday, I got up. But in the meantime, I'd gone through her purse looking for money and found a little ad that she had put in the Bakersfield, California, stating that she was not responsible for any other debts other than her own. And on the back of this little ad, which she still carries today, is this telephone number of Alcoholics Anonymous. So on Monday morning when I left, she just made the statement that I hope somewhere along the line that you might find yourself. So I left and drove on over to Maricopa and bought a pint of booze there and started drinking on that and went on over to Greenfield and drove on across over to Cottonwood Road. I don't know whether any of you know where Cottonwood Road is or not, in the notoriety of Cottonwood Road. Pulled off on the side of the road and went to sleep. How long I slept, I don't know. I have no idea. But I knocked off that half a pint. So I woke up and drove back over to Greenfield in the Old Palms Liquor Store, which is still there. Bought another half a pint. Going down to Bakersfield to see some of my dear friends that I used to drink with. And I find a few of them, but they wasn't too anxious to see me. But in the meantime, Margaret had been staying, Margaret and Bob had been staying with some people there. And I set out to find them. And I was walking down the street and I knocked on the door and a fellow come to the door and I asked him this is the place where my wife and son had been staying, and I like to scare him to death because he was, I didn't know it, but I had learned later, and at that particular time there was a 12-step call being made on him at that particular time by some people from the club. I continued on down the street and knocking on doors and eventually found the place where she and Bob had been staying part of the time while I was away. And while I was sitting there talking to her, the telephone rang. And it was Margaret calling this lady and tell her, for God's sakes, if he comes by there, don't let him stay. Now, I didn't know this for a long, long time until she told me. But anyway, I left there, went on back uptown, and went into the old Padre Hotel. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, where the old Padre Hotel is, but I started into the bar to get a drink, but I decided not to. I went to the telephone and called Alcoholics Anonymous. Now this is the miracle that I'm talking about. The fact that on that I had no idea about looking up the telephone number in the telephone book, but remember, at that particular time, the telephone number that I had seen on the back of this ad that she had put in the paper, and was carrying and called the telephone, called the Alcoholics Anonymous, and the fellow answered the telephone, and I asked him if you people can do me any good. And the reply that I got back, hell no. If you want to help yourself. Now this is the experience that I've had since being a part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That whenever I pitched the ball out to them, they would all throw it back to me, stating very emphatically that it was my responsibility and not theirs. But the fellow that answered the telephone, I know ordinarily would have told him to take the thing and ram it. And I wanted no part of it, but I asked him what time the meeting was, and he told me at 8 o'clock. And at 8 o'clock I was there. And this is the miracle that I'm talking about, is the fact that this young man in Dublin, Georgia, that sat down and told me the story of his life as a drinker, and also his story as being a part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, that the seed at that time was planted. And that after coming back to California and finding this number in Margaret's purse, and then going into this hotel where I had drank many and many times before, and instead of going to the bar, I went to the telephone and called Alcoholic Anonymous. And went to the first meeting that night drunk. The singing off I did. One time. He doesn't like the way drunk, but we are. And this was the beginning of the association, my association and Margaret's association with the program of Alcoholic Anonymous. And this is the first miracle that I had experienced in the program and with the program. That night, those people that asked me anything at all about where I had come from, what my standing in the community was, what my financial standard was, which was very low in every respect, but only asked me if I wanted to do something about my drinking. That if you want to do something about your drinking, we are here ready and willing to share with you our experience as a drunk and also as a sober drunk. And I think this is a wonderful thing that we find in the program of Alcoholic Anonymous, that we have no gimmicks whatsoever, only one drunk relating to another. And as I think about the program of Alcoholic Anonymous, again I like to think about the miracle of this program that we have tonight, that has not saved souls, but have saved so many lives and so many families throughout the world, not only in the United States, but in most every foreign country throughout the world. To me, it is a godsend because of the fact of how this thing happened. This again is another miracle in my life. This is what I like to think about the beginning of the program of Alcoholic Anonymous. We all hear a lot about Bill Wilson, the man that he was that come out of World War I and went into the brokerage business in New York. In a short period of time, had accumulated a fortune. And after accumulating a fortune, in a very short period of time, he lost that fortune through drinking. And he done this repeatedly, time in and time again. And every time he would go to the hospital, and there was a doctor in that hospital by the name of Dr. Silkworth. He got to know him very intimately. And on his last drunk, he went into the hospital broke and began to wonder. And he asked Dr. Silkworth, what can I do? What's going to happen? And he said, get out and talk to these drunks in this hospital. And he did. He got out of the ward and he started talking to the people. This was an alcoholic hospital, alcoholic ward that he was in. And Dr. Silkworth had treated thousands upon thousands of drunks. And so after he was dismissed, he told them the same thing. When you get out of here, go out and find drunks to talk to. Maybe you'll stay sober. And he did this, and he'd come home at night. And he'd tell Lois he hadn't got anybody sober. He said, well, you're staying sober yourself, aren't you? And this is a miracle of Alcoholic Anonymous. That this man got out and started talking to drunks. And we all know the story of what happened in Akron. That he went out there at Christmas time on a business deal, expecting to get established back into the business world. And this deal fell through. He was very disappointed, and he come down out of the hotel room and started to the bar. But instead he saw a bank of telephones up on the left. And he saw over there a church directory. And he decided he'd call a priest. And he called this priest. He wanted to know if he knew of any drunks that he could talk to. And he said that he didn't, but he knew of somebody that knew of a drunk that he could talk to. So he gave Bill the name of this person and the telephone number, Sue Cycling. There's a cycling tire and rubber company. And he got in touch with her. And she invited him out. And she had a very good friend who was Ann Smith, wife of Dr. Bob Smith. And she carried Bill over to meet Ann Smith and to meet Dr. Bob, and Dr. Bob was out drunk. Dr. Bob come in drunk and was introduced to Bill. Bill started talking to Dr. Bob. And he decided that they had something there. So they started out to the Oxford group. And some other had some idea. They didn't know whether this was a thing or not. So in a short period of time, Dr. Bob had to go to Atlantic City. You read the story of Dr. Bob. Why in Atlantic at a conference, and while there he got drunk. When he come back to Akron, he was in very bad shape, and the next Monday morning he had to have an appointment for an operation. And they worked with him all the weekend to get him sobered up to a place where he could go in and perform the operation. And by doing this, he went in and was successful with the operation. And this was the last drunk that he was ever on. And they become in contact with Sister Ignatia, who was a head nurse at the hospital which he was operating on, and they began to talk to her. And she set up 2 beds in the hospital for drunks. And this was the beginning. 2 people that they brought into this hospital, one a contractor, I forgot now who the other was. And Bill hung around there for quite a while. And he went back to New York. And this is when he started. And the many people that come in contact with Bill at that particular time, they were not alcoholics. They were a great influence in the program that we have today. Lois, Sister Ignatia, Sue Seidler, Ann Smith, New York, Sam Shoemaker, the Rockefeller family, Dr. Tebow, and many others that we could name that were very instrumental in this program. And the great denial, I would say, that the Rockefeller Foundation denied Bill money. That we know that you have a great thing here, but we don't want to spoil it with money. And this is the thing we found out. This is the first miracle in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is why we today are self-supporting. Don Crane often says this is the only mental institution, a mental asylum, where the inmates run the asylum. The miracles of Alcoholics Anonymous are many. It takes a long, long time to relate all of the things that have happened in my life as a result of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. In the beginning of our association with the program, there wasn't any Al-Anon. Margaret and I would travel from Guiama over to Taft, over to Bakersfield, to meetings, and come back to Guiama that night. The round trip to Bakersfield was 175 miles, or 150 miles. Round trip to Bakersfield to Taft was about 80 miles. And I believe this is the reason that they have in chapter 5, if you are willing to go to any length to get this thing, this is what we are talking about. We become very interested in it. And the people of Alcoholics Anonymous become interested in us. And the other miracles of this thing is, in growing up on the program, we used to have many controversies. I was a sick person. So is she. Any person that lives with an alcoholic can become just as neurotic as the alcoholic. I know it now, and I knew it early in the program because of the fact that looking back over my history of drinking and the many excuses that she used to make for me when people would come to the house or call. And I think one of the fellows that with the union organ, and one of the doctors there said that she was an enabler. But picking up all the hot checks that I would have out on paydays for her, she would pick up the checks instead of letting me suffer the consequences of having hot checks out, of making the excuses and many things that she did along that time, thinking probably that she was helping. But the only thing that she was doing, she was enabling me to continue to drink. And we find that so much in so many different people that we associate with that have come into the program, that they are members of the family that are desperately in love with these persons, in which I'm sure that she was with me, that they enable us to go down to the very bottom. And I'm a great believer in the fact that if you haven't hit your bottom, you don't stand much chance of making the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't have to go as far as I did. There's many that went further than I did, but many that didn't go quite as far. And I like to take along the line in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous of the three cardinal virtues: faith, hope, and charity. A little bit in reverse of hope, faith, and charity. We fall into this program unaware of what it's all about, unaware of what the conditions that exist with us at that particular time, hoping beyond hope that we might find something here that we can do something about our drinking. Little do we realize in this hope that we are sick, that we are afflicted with the disease of alcoholism. And these people tell us, who have experienced the same things that we have, that we have a mental obsession coupled with an allergy. In other words, we have nuts. And we can't drink. If we drink, we go nutty. And we do things that we, as a human being, are not responsible. We think. And this was a thing that occurred in my life. But the things that I did during my drinking career, I would never as a sober person think of doing. Never would I think of leaving Bakersfield, California for the East Coast with $5 in my pocket. Never would I think of leaving Guayama with an old automobile that looked like one of these Suna dogs with the kingpins all out of the front end, one of the windows out, and a bad transmission in it going to the East Coast. But this is some of the stupid things that we do. And they began to relate to me how to determine whether you're insane or not. By looking at yourself and look at some of the things that you had been doing during your drinking careers. And this wasn't too hard to find out for me. Then we come into the program and we see a group of people that are telling us just exactly how we drink. A group of people that we've never seen telling us exactly the things that we used to do when we were drinking. We have a group of people telling us how afraid that we were, how insecure that we are, how hopeless that we feel, how dependent we become upon alcohol. And we begin to listen to them and we begin to have a little faith in what they're talking about. And by having a little faith, as Denny Gleason himself used to say so often, that we accepted this thing up here on blind faith. And I'm sure that this is what happened to me, and I'm sure this is what happened to him. Because of the fact that we knew nothing at all about alcoholism, we knew nothing at all about Alcoholics Anonymous, but we accepted on blind faith that these people knew what they were talking about. And by hanging around and listening to the people and trying to the best of our ability to follow in their footsteps and to share our experiences with them, that things began to open up. That I could look at myself and see myself as other people had been seeing me all these years as a drunk. That I was not dependable. That I could not face reality. That I knew nothing at all about what the real life of a human being was about. That I wasn't contributing anything at all to society, but a detriment to society. And then I began to have a little faith in myself that I could stay sober after a period of time. And as I began to stay sober, the pains of Alcoholics Anonymous started to catch up. Of knowing what fear was, knowing what anxiety was, knowing what insecurity was, knowing the person that I was. Not knowing what was in store for me. And the great lesson that I learned that today is the only day that I can do anything at all about my life. And this is the thing that they told me. That you have quit drinking 10,000 times in your life, I'm sure. And you don't have to stop drinking. You just don't take that first drink. And I haven't realized until I got here that this was a thing that happened. That first drink was the thing that caused me to do the things that I was doing. And by gaining a little faith in the people that were associated with the program, I began to get a little faith in myself that I could straighten up and be a human being again. And all of this was a gift of the miracles of Alcoholics Anonymous. We could go on and talk about this for a long time, but the charity of the thing that we're talking about is no way in the world for me as an alcoholic to stay sober other than giving it away. Sharing my experience, my hope with each and every drunk that might come into that door back there seeking the things that we all are seeking. A way of sobriety, a way of doing something about our drinking. In the journey along, that we find, and as Margaret often always says, that the thousands upon thousands of people that we have come in contact with since being a part of this thing is a miracle within itself. I think of it every day. There's no way in the world that I could have known each and every one of you, that you have become a part of my life, unless it's through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Today we have friends that are scattered throughout the continental United States and Canada that are very close friends that we have come in contact with only through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Their giving to us has enabled us to give back to the ones in whom we come in contact with. The greatest thing I feel that I've found since coming to the program, you haven't pulled out your copy.
I'm going to right now.
is love. I never knew what love was until I got here. I always had the idea that it was something physical, that something that I could take, something that I could feel. My conception of love today is the fact that I can be a part of a person or a thing or an organization. This is what I found in the program, which I love so much. I love all of the people that are associated with AA, is love by being a part of this wonderful program. And may God continue to bless each and every one of you. Thank you very much.